As a company, we're very much focused on enabling online business. We are true believers that in the future, every business, even the smallest business, is going to be a global business. So, and we know from my home country, Denmark, where we have these really great identity processes where you can basically use a little card to interact with any government or a commercial player. We know that that enables business to speed up, and we can do transactions faster with more trust and basically streamline everything. So we think it's really important that we give those tools to the rest of the world so that you can access those markets that are currently inaccessible because you can't identify people. And as an event, PayExpo was pretty perfect for meeting other stakeholders with the same mindset. So when we were presented with the opportunity to present at the Dragons Den, that was pretty much a no-brainer. So we got to meet a lot of like-minded people, and we got to both on the customer side, but also on the investor side and on the partnering side. So I don't think we could have gone to a much better event for us at this time. Actually, one of the comments that we got from the judges was that we might have focused too much on that number because that's the negative side of the coin. So what happens in a typical scenario, now this changes a lot from vendor to vendor. If they have invested heavily in risk management processes, they can cut it down to a lower figure, but a lot of merchants will have a higher figure than that. So what happens is let's say you get 100 users through to your website. 70 of those users will, in a typical risk management pipeline, be flagged as good green-lighted users. They have an IP number from the same country, and they fill in the forms as in a normal way. But 30% of the users coming through will look somehow. They'll get the yellow light, and out of those. Well, not out of those, but 5% will actually be red lighted because they look really weird. Maybe everything's been copy-pasted in, or the IP number is not from that country, or something else is happening, so that the merchant says, okay, that's too high risk, I don't even want to talk to these guys. So 5% out there. So you take the remaining 25% through some sort of identity process to establish whether or not you can send the goods to them or do the transaction with them. And for those 25%, you're going to be spending on average about £1 and 5 minutes, and that will amount to about £2.60. So you're actually, for 25% of your transactions, you're spending money, and you don't even know if it's going to turn out right. So at the end of that process, you usually end up reading out 7%, because for some reason you couldn't identify them or they look bad. So that's 5 plus 7, that amounts to 12%. Now, you can be very sure that 12% of the business coming through your site is not bad people, but it's simply because it's very difficult to identify people that are outside of the normal. So there are a lot of thin files in the UK, for example, even though that's a really well-working environment. You have a lot of people who don't actually have a credit rating. You have a lot of people that you have a lot of teenagers still able to buy stuff if you let them, and you have a big migrant workforce. Now, I'm not talking about people begging on the street coming from some other country. I'm talking about student people working in banks, but they won't have a credit rating. They won't have electoral roll data or anything like that. So you're actually throwing good money out because you're not sure. And usually you can say that it's only to prevent one in a lot of well, let's say you have 1,000 cases. You're trying to sort of avoid the one case where there's a fraudster trying to get to a lot of money, or trying to get through with maybe £10,000 worth of fraud or something like that, and you're losing all this business because you're trying to prevent that one case. And that's really quite tragic when you think about the e-commerce industry being, it'll be up to like a $3 trillion industry in 2016. So 12% of that is a lot of money. So the story of our company is Me and a bunch of the other co-founders actually started a company in 2007 called ahead.com, which we built up and sold in 2010. And after we did that, we all liked working so much together, and the investors had so much faith in us that they thought, okay, so go ahead and start a new company. And we didn't actually have any idea about what we were going to do, but we just knew that we liked working together. So we went ahead and started a company, and the first thing that we did was create a product that would basically map everything you do online into your Dropbox, so that you would, not have that problem of, 10 years from now when my daughter asks me, can you show me some pictures of what happened in 2014? I'm not going to be able to pull my photo album off of the shelf anymore because we don't do those. So all my stuff is parked in Facebook or in different places, Instagram. So we thought, okay, so that would be great if people could just take control of that stuff, because we don't know, MySpace kind of faded out very quickly, and the same could happen with Instagram and Facebook and the other guys, and we don't want to sort of leave people without a history. So we thought, okay, that's going to be a great product, and we did it. But the problem with backup is that people only buy it after the fact, if I can say it like that. So people only will buy backup once something terrible happens, and we kind of realized that midway. And so we thought, okay, so what we're doing is really we're hooking into this unique data stream that everybody's producing all the time using our devices and laptops and whatever else gear we're going to be wearing in the future. And that, if you look at the binary string from those sources, that's a fairly unique and very, very long text string, if you can look at it like that. And we thought, okay, that's an amazing sort of token that everybody produces that's so unique to them. So let's look at how to use that to identify them instead of sort of backing up that data. So that's how it sort of came about. The most valuable one is Facebook, and there's no question about that. Facebook is taking over the world in that respect. They've got 1.3 billion users that use their platform 6 days, and half of them use their platform 6 days of every week. So that's a tremendous amount of data that's being produced through that platform. So Facebook is in about 53% of the checks is involved in the check. Second most popular social network is Google and LinkedIn, and then I think it's Twitter. And the most popular combination, as I remember it, is Facebook, Google, and SMS. So we also do other sources, like we do authentication through an SMS or an email, and we do other things than social. And as I said, so the most popular one is consisting of two social networks and a sort of what we call a one-time password sent to the phone. So I see it changing in a positive way for us. So in many ways you can see how governments are structurally failing these days. We've seen it with the crisis in Europe and in the States as well. Governments are having difficulties addressing things that are cross-border. So anything to do with trade across borders, rights management, and currency exchange, remittance, all that stuff is really very difficult to handle in a world that's based on very closed entities. So I see that the role of government is going to change into more, hopefully, I would like them to be more of a back end to a lot of the things that the commercial players want to do. So we would like the government to enable their citizens to relay information to someone like us, so that a government could actually be a provider in the same way that Facebook is to us, and they would just be considered a reliant provider, and in the same way that we think PayPal is a reliant provider. Now, so that's about the role of government going forward, and I would like them to sort of embrace the fact that the world is increasingly global, and we all move. I commute to London, for example, and that's just the world as it is, and it's going to be more of that. And at the same time, we're seeing that 62% of the population in the world is using social networks, and they're all fairly active there. So, so we've just seen the beginning of that, basically. So I remember I started my Facebook profile in 2007, and that's not that long ago. And we're just seeing the volume of data and basically the fatness of our pipes is just increasing exponentially, whereas the richness of the data coming from the traditional sources is diminishing, as I talked about before, because people move a lot, and the companies like Experian and the other guys are quite regional in their approach to identity. So they will identify someone in the UK, and if you need someone in Denmark identified, that'll be another entity, even though it's still an Experian company. So we're kind of we don't really care where the user's from, as long as they have data available to provide to us. We can provide a fairly reliable identity for that person. What we're depending on is the activity level of that user, and that's going to go up consistently. That's going up for everybody, because we all have these devices, and we're all going to have, you know, little things on our bodies that will keep producing data. So it'll just be more and more, and that's a bright future for someone like us. We'll also take in biometric stuff. I know Intel and a couple of other companies are working on hardware that'll enable people to authenticate themselves using hardware on their phones in different places, and that'll remove the authenticity problem that we have right now, because the way you identify a user now is that you ask them to write their info down, and then you take that info and you ask Experian, is this true? And then they come back with a yes, no, or refer. The problem with that process is that, you know, you don't know that the person writing the info is that actual person. And so in my experience, well, in my opinion, doing what I am doing, that's theater. You're not really identifying anyone because you're not authenticating. Well, you're identifying someone, but it's not necessarily the person behind the computer or the device. That's a big problem if you're dealing with age verification or anti-money laundering and things like that. So we think the future will hold sort of some processes that are not only the identity, but also the authentication mixed into it, and so we can do tests on the data. For example, we can ask you questions based on the data. We can ask you, who is this picture of some of your friends, or we can ask you what's your favorite Spotify playlist, or we can ask you what movie did you watch last night on Netflix, which will be a really good way to figure out if the user is that person saying that they're Rasmus in this case. We see the amount of data becoming available to us, it's just going to increase, and people are going to be connected in so many ways that there will be an abundance of data that we can use these things, these verification methods on. And I feel that a risk-based approach to identity is the right one, because what nobody realizes is that even a passport is using that as a means of identification is still a risk-based approach, because we just think that the provider of that data set is a fairly reliable provider, a government. We think they know what they're doing. But these other guys, Google and Facebook and these other guys, they know what they're doing. And the data that they're providing to us is extremely good, and they will just get better and better at it. Even so, if Facebook would introduce a verified identity, that's just great for us, because that's just another reliable partner. So what we're going for is we want to be the new Experian of the world, or we feel there's enough potential to be sort of in the same league as Visa or MasterCard or players like that, because business hinges on identity. Any process where you're trying to make a transaction involves identifying both parties of that transaction. And so with the growth in the digital trends, we feel that there's an up. It's going to go up for people who adapt our profile, and it's going to be difficult for people based on that are basing their methods on old data to survive. So we're either looking to take over some of these incumbents or to become part of them at some point. So as part of that process, we of course need to fairly ambitious goal. So we're growing our sales pipeline, and at the same time we're trying to raise some money so that we can actually up the organization to be able to handle that kind of challenge. So in the future, we also what we want to do is put people's identity in their own hands, because right now people don't actually realize that every time they fill out a form online, they're being checked against a credit rating agency. And we feel that's fairly intrusive into people's lives. It's a bit of a. I feel it's a shame that people are not actually aware of the amount of data that's floating around about them out there. So what we're trying to do, so our approach is consent driven. Every time a user is going to be identified using our process, they're going to be made aware of it, and they're going to specifically consent to it by signing up with Facebook or something like that. They will know what's going on. And what we're trying to do is, inspired by Facebook and the other social networks, what we would like to do is present the user with a profile that can be used as a I guess next generation passport, and that passport will show them who has accessed what data and who has access to the data. So for example, if on Facebook you can see if that you've connected Angry Birds with your profile, and we see it the same way. So the Veridu profile will know that a merchant has access to, for example, the name and the age of the person, and they will then be able to go, okay, I don't want that anymore. I don't want these guys to have access to my profile anymore. That's not really possible right now unless the user is really, really adamant about it. So they would have to call up Experian and go through a complaint process. What we want is for the user to have all that information in front of them, just be able to go in and out with whoever they want to have access to that.